Hello, my dear friends. How are you doing? Hope you are having an amazing day and not having to deal with drama. Ready for new stories I have for you today? Let's go to the first one. And don't forget to listen to the end of the story, guys, to hear my insights. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment. I never imagined I'd be in this position, spilling the deeply personal story of my life to strangers on Reddit. But the events of the past week have left me shaken, furious, and, frankly, confused. I need an unbiased perspective because I'm starting to question everything. To give some background, I, 36 male, grew up with Jake, 36 male. Jake wasn't just my best friend. He was like a brother to me. We met in middle school, bonded over our love of comic books and video games, and became inseparable. From middle school to college, Jake and I were a team. We had each other's backs through everything. I truly believed we'd be in each other's lives forever. I guess I wasn't wrong, just not in the way I expected. About 10 years ago, Jake started dating Emma, 32 female. Emma was one of the kindest, smartest, and most beautiful women I'd ever met. I could see why Jake was head over heels for her. They seemed perfect together, always laughing, always supportive of each other. They were that couple you just knew were going to make it. When Jake proposed to Emma, I wasn't surprised in the slightest. Jake asked me to be his best man, and of course, I said yes. Helping Jake plan the wedding was exciting, and seeing how happy he and Emma were made me believe in love. But looking back, there were warning signs I missed. Once he called me late at night, rambling about how the wedding felt like a big step, or how he wasn't sure he was ready. I reassured him, telling him it was normal to feel anxious before a big life change. I wish I had asked more questions and pressed him harder back then. The wedding day arrived. It was a picture-perfect morning. Emma looked radiant in her dress, her smile lighting up the entire room. Guests were seated, the decorations were stunning, and the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. I remember standing at the altar, waiting for Jake to arrive so we could kick off the ceremony. But Jake never showed up. At first, I thought he was just running late or stuck in traffic. But as the seconds turned into minutes, the reality of the situation began to sink in. Jake wasn't coming. His phone was off, and no one could reach him. We were all panicking. Emma, her family, the guests, even me. I kept telling myself there had to be a good explanation. Maybe he'd gotten cold feet but would show up eventually. Maybe he'd been in an accident. But no, the truth was far worse. Hours later, we got a message, but not from Jake. It was a text from an unfamiliar number. Jake had run off with another woman, Sophie, someone he'd apparently been seeing behind Emma's back for months. He'd left Emma standing at the altar, humiliated in front of her family and friends, and disappeared without a trace. I was stunned. I couldn't comprehend how Jake, my best friend, could do something so cruel. This wasn't just impulsive or reckless, it was heartless. And Emma, she was shattered. She kept asking, why? What did I do wrong? There was no answer. Jake had destroyed her world without a second thought. The days that followed were a whirlwind of anger, confusion, and heartbreak. Emma went into a deep depression. Her family tried to support her, but they were just as blindsided as the rest of us. Meanwhile, Jake had vanished completely. No calls, no texts, no explanations. He had ghosted everyone. Then, 2 weeks later, Emma found out she was pregnant. She was understandably terrified, but also hopeful that maybe this news would bring Jake back to his senses. I still remember the tremble in her voice when she told me she had reached out to him, and then his parents after she didn't hear back from him. I guess his parents told him the news, so this coward contacted Emma finally, but not to apologize. He told her he wanted nothing to do with the baby. He said he wasn't ready to be a father, that this wasn't part of his plan, and even had the audacity to suggest she get rid of it. When Emma refused, he blocked her again. Just like that. He erased her and their unborn child from his life. When Emma told me, I saw red. I couldn't believe my best friend, the guy I had trusted and admired for so many years, could be such an irredeemable a-hole. He didn't just abandon Emma, he abandoned his child. I felt a deep sense of betrayal, not just for Emma, but for myself. How could I have been friends with someone capable of this? Emma was left to face everything alone. The pregnancy, the humiliation, the uncertainty. I couldn't stand by and watch her struggle. I started helping her in small ways, driving her to doctor's appointments, helping her set up a nursery, and just being there to listen. Over time, those small gestures turned into something deeper. Emma and I became close. At first, it was purely platonic, two people leaning on each other in a time of crisis. But as months passed, our bond grew stronger. I fell in love with her, and to my surprise, she felt the same way. I was terrified of what people might think, but when I looked at Emma, I knew I couldn't walk away. She had been abandoned and betrayed, and I wanted to be the person who never let her down. When her son, Liam, 9 male, was born, I was there in the delivery room. I held him in my arms and made a silent promise to love and protect him as if he were my own. A couple of years later, Emma and I got married and we became a family. Raising Liam has been the greatest joy of my life. He's my son in every way that matters. I've never seen him as Jake's kid. He's simply my son, Liam. We've been honest with Liam about his biological father, but he rarely mentions him as he has me and sees me as his real father. Fast forward to last week. Jake came back to town. After nearly a decade of radio silence, he showed up out of the blue, claiming he wanted to reconnect. I was skeptical but willing to hear him out. Maybe he had changed. Maybe he wanted to apologize. But no, Jake wasn't here to make amends. He was here to accuse me of betrayal. Jake found out through mutual friends that I had married Emma and raised Liam. He showed up at my house unannounced and started yelling at me. He called me a backstabber and accused me of stealing his family. He said I had no right to marry Emma or raise his son. I was stunned by his audacity. This was the same man who abandoned Emma, told her to get an A, and blocked her when she needed him most. And now he was angry at me for stepping up? Jake demanded to see Liam, claiming he wanted to be a father. I told him to get lost. He had 9 years to step up, and he didn't. I wasn't about to let him waltz back into Liam's life and play the victim. When he threatened to take legal action for custody, I snapped. I told him if he wanted to play that game, I'd see him in court, but not for custody. We will sue him for 9 years of unpaid child support. That shut him up pretty quickly. He stormed out, but not before calling me a backstabbing a-hole. Since then, some mutual friends have chimed in, saying I overstepped by marrying Emma and raising Liam. They argue that Jake was going through a rough time back then, and that I should have been more understanding. But I don't buy it. Being stressed doesn't justify abandoning your pregnant fiance and refusing to take responsibility for your child. Emma is fully on my side, and so is her family. As far as we're concerned, Jake made his choice years ago. But the backlash from some of our friends has made me question myself. Did I overstep by marrying Emma? Should I have stayed out of it? Or was I just doing what any decent person would do in the face of Jake's cruelty? Opie is not just the a-hole. He is a damn hero. Jake abandoned Emma at her most vulnerable moment and then doubled down his cruelty by blocking her after she told him she was pregnant. He made it crystal clear he wanted no part in their lives, and Opie stepped up where he utterly failed. Opie didn't steal his family. He threw them away, and Opie built a life with the people he discarded. Now he shows up 9 years later, expecting to play daddy? Absolutely not. He doesn't get to rewrite history or demand a role in Liam's life when he hasn't done a single thing to earn it. If he were serious about being a father, he would have reached out years ago, not stormed into Opie's house yelling about betrayal. His ego is hurt because he's realizing how much better Opie has done without him. Wow, this story gave me chills. Opie, I don't think you realize just how incredible you've been throughout this entire situation. You went above and beyond for Emma and Liam, not out of obligation, but because you genuinely cared. That kind of selflessness isn't something you see every day. As for Jake, he's projecting. Deep down, he knows he's the one who abandoned his family and betrayed you, not the other way around. His "you stole my family" nonsense is a weak attempt to shift the blame for his own terrible decisions. The fact that he thought he could waltz back in after 9 years and make demands is laughable. Not the a-hole. And let's talk about these so-called friends who think you overstepped. Are they serious? Jake abandoned his pregnant fiance after cheating on her, told her to get an A, and blocked her when she refused. What exactly were you supposed to do? Leave Emma and Liam to fend for themselves out of loyalty to a man who clearly has no concept of loyalty himself? Let's call this what it is. Jake is embarrassed. He's back in town, sees the life you've built, and realizes he's the loser in the story. You've got a beautiful family, a loving wife, and a son who adores you. Meanwhile, he's probably burned every bridge he's ever crossed. His bruised ego doesn't make you the bad guy. Your friends defending Jake need to take a hard look at their priorities. Supporting a deadbeat dad who's trying to rewrite history is a terrible look. Block them, focus on your family, and let Jake crawl back under whatever rock he came from. You did the right thing, OP. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I won't make this long. I, 28 female, had a party to celebrate my husband's, 28 male, birthday 2 weeks ago. My half-sisters, 18 female and 19 female, were invited, as was my mom. During the party, my half-sisters went on a rant at my mom for being a terrible friend in person to their mom, who died several years ago. Their mom was the affair partner of our father. She was also supposed to be my mom's best friend. My mom hated her and my dad for what they did, and refused to have anything to do with them or my half-sisters. She always told me I did not have to hate them for her, but that I had to understand she would never be their family. My half-sister's mother got sick several years ago. She tried to make up with my mom, but my mom would not go and see her and apparently died torn up about it, and many of her family believe she died faster because she wanted to see mom again. They had grown up together and known each other from the age of 2, and they believe she truly regretted hurting my mom. A lot of anger was aimed at my mom for this. I always told my half-sisters not to drag me into that mess, and that I would not stand for them insulting her around me. They were good about that, until the party. I also found out they had sort of planned to gang up on her and make a public scene, because they said they had been waiting to say that stuff to her. I was furious. I told them to leave. They asked how I could make them leave over her, that their mom. I told them I did not care about their mother, and their mother was not more important to me than my own. I told them they were no longer welcome. They argued back, but were escorted out. They tried to call me several times since. I've not answered. They've sent texts saying I'm an a-hole, and how could I abandon them like this and treat them so terribly? Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. They deliberately caused the situation with the mistaken belief that your mom should have continued being besties with her husband's affair partner. That's definitely not even a little bit okay. I'm not sure how you've abandoned them just because you don't need to listen to their BS. You seem quite reasonable to me. Went on a rant at my mom for being a terrible friend in person to their mom. Excuse me? Projection much? Who effing cares that your dad's affair partner tried to make up before she died with the childhood friend she betrayed? Your mom was under no obligation to relieve her ex-friend's burden or justifiable guilt, and your half-sisters and their family can stuff it. All of them can live or die with the consequences of their actions, including their rotten behavior at your party. Not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. It's unfortunate, but your mother had every right to erect boundaries against someone who betrayed her. Really the worst kind of betrayal. She did not owe it to her former best friend, betrayer, to forgive her. She was generous to you to say she did not object to your having a relationship with your half-sisters. Your half-sisters were out of line. Their mother and your father were responsible for destroying your mother's family. Your nuclear family too, of course. It's up to you if you want to resume contact with them. I, 16 female, work and buy most if not all of the food I eat. I also get to buy video games and things like that when something good comes out. I don't ever have to ask my dad or his wife for money. But sometimes my step-siblings, stepsister, 15 female, and stepbrother, 14 male, will ask me for money or for some of the food I bought, or they'll want me to buy them a video game. I've always said no, and now that they're both technically old enough, I tell them to babysit or get some kind of job where they can pay for that stuff. My dad's wife doesn't like it. She says what's mine is technically hers and my dad's, and it should be shared. I told her I work for it though, and I've worked in some capacity since I was 14, and I sometimes got money when I was 13 to pick up groceries for a neighbor, which I started doing to help her out, but she would pay me a little sometimes. She went on about family again, and then my dad told me it was selfish of me not to be more inclusive of my siblings. He and I talked one-on-one where I told him we weren't siblings, that they only wanted something from me because I have money and they don't. But they never gave a crap about us being a family either. We have never acted or lived as a family. Before this stuff really got annoying, we lived as two separate families, and once my step-siblings started asking, my dad and his wife started acting like we were siblings who'd known each other a long time. But even now it has been only 3 years since I first met her kids and her. They were together 2 years before they got married, and we weren't introduced before then. My dad still thinks I should consider them my family and should be more selfless and loving because we'll always be in each other's lives, and he was mad that I didn't consider them family because he said step-family is still family. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. You are not obligated to share possessions you've paid for yourself or give them money you've earned. This would be the same even if they were full siblings. If your stepmom and dad don't want them to earn their own money, they should be the ones to buy them what they want. Not the a-hole. Whether stepfamilies are immediately families or not is a whole different debate. But you absolutely should not be expected to spend your hard-earned money or share your personal belongings with anyone, full-blood siblings included. Not the a-hole. Please talk to your dad again and ask him to help you separate these two issues. The first issue, you work for your money. You have since you were 14, and you do not understand why the rules are different for you and your step-siblings. Why are you expected to earn your spending money, but they are somehow just entitled to money you earn, rather than having to earn it themselves? How is that fair? Then let them know you would have the same question if they were your biological siblings, and this is a separate issue from whether they are a loving family. 10 years ago, I lost my sister. She had 2 kids, Elodie, 15 female, and Luca, 13 male, who were only 5 and 3 at the time of her passing. Her husband, Mike, met Susan about 3 years later. They were together for 2 years, had 2 kids, and were very newly married when he passed away. When Mike died, the kids wanted to stay with my parents. My parents wanted custody of the kids, but Susan wanted to keep and adopt them. A court battle ensued. Before the court case was finished, I retained temporary custody of them. The judge named my parents as the legal guardians and suggested they try to keep in touch with their younger half-siblings. Susan made that difficult. She was a struggling single mom and would expect my family to provide for her kids when they would see my nibblings. When they wouldn't, she prevented them from meeting, and so contact was very limited. Except she stopped communication with my parents years ago now, but she still reaches out to me, and she will still make a fuss about us stealing her kids and how we denied them a parent by taking them from her. More recently, she started asking me to bring them to her upcoming 40th birthday party. I started to ignore her, and she got more persistent. I told her to stop, to speak to my parents. She ignored me. So I told her that she had no reason to contact me anymore, that my nibblings were not her children, she was not in their lives anymore, and she needed to either let it go or speak to my nibblings' actual custodial relatives. This apparently was so nasty to say, because not only did she react to what I sent her, but Mike's parents said I was too harsh, and that she was still their family as their siblings' mom, and it was such a shame the kids don't grow to love and appreciate Susan in that length of time, but it doesn't mean I should crap on her when she still cares so much. I fired back that she can't care too much when she stopped her kids from seeing them because we didn't give them gifts. They had no real answer for that, because even they weren't allowed to facilitate access. I do wonder if I should have been less harsh, though. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole, because it sounds like she would have no reason to contact you at all. If she wants to keep all the siblings in contact, she should go through the dad's parents, since the dad is their connection. Poor kids. I hope they have adjusted well. That is a lot to go through. Not the a-hole. Lady made her bed and tried to claim 2 kids who weren't hers to begin with, then tried to force your family to financially support her other children. Some of the problems with being a step-parent is that once that relationship ends, you lose the other person's kids. It's the reason I don't date someone with kids. She tried to keep them and failed. Everyone sucks here, leaning you're the a-hole. You see Susan as an enemy due to the custody battle. But from here, she looks like a woman who loved them enough to want to keep them. And how is that bad to have more people like that in their lives? What are Elodie and Luca's thoughts? Do they want to see her? Also, what exactly does provide for during the half-siblings visits mean? Like, expect them to be included in the fun activities you guys choose? Even if they were expensive and fed, or if it's Christmas or a birthday, someone would think to get them a present and be considerate about the disparity? Unless she was making large demands outside of their visits, like for private school tuition if their half-siblings were being sent to private school, or expensive ballet lessons because niece was getting the same. The request for equal treatment during visits seems pretty reasonable, and actually good parenting, not sending her children to a place where they'd be treated as second-class citizens. I would like to point out that your parents, and you, choose the activities she wanted you to pay for. The kids do not care. They did not want to stay with Susan, and they do not want a relationship with her. She wanted birthday and Christmas gifts and random little gifts sent from time to time. Basically, she wanted them to treat them the way they did my niece and nephew, even though they had custody. She was the one who would choose a place that costs money versus a park which is free, and then expect them to pay. They would try to keep it in a neutral place and somewhere that wouldn't cost money, but that wasn't always what she wanted. Honestly, the contact should have happened with Mike's parents, since they're the grandparents of all 4 kids, and they seem to care now but never offered to help before. And they saw Elodie and Luca, and they saw their other grandkids. My stepsiblings and I had very different families. My dad and stepmother adopted them when I was 18 to 21, and they're being raised in a very traditional, obey your parents, family is everything environment. I was raised the opposite of that. Something incredibly traumatic happened to my stepmother that was caused by my mother, so once I was 13, I didn't really have parents anymore. I was not only allowed, but encouraged to be out of the house as much as possible, and with no questions asked about where I was going or what I was doing. My dad would literally drive me wherever I asked, which I rarely had to. Around age 14, I ended up quietly moving in with a local college student who was pretty much informally running a home for rejected kids. Some of them were related to her, most were not. Looking back, it was an incredibly sketchy setup, but she was genuinely a good person, and the other kids involved were also the best they could be, so it managed to be okay. I'm still in touch with most of them today, and one of them is now my fiance. I don't have as much contact with my family because we're not close, but I am trying. Recently, they've been complaining about the things they fight with their teenage kids on. They won't let their 16-year-old get birth control because they think it's not appropriate. I was borderline forced on it at 13 because I was alone too much. So this stance of theirs is news to me, and I reminded them of that. I didn't realize they were on speakerphone. The kids heard it, and they freaked out. Now my parents are mad at me for bringing up a dark chapter and for giving the kids information that they can't possibly understand. I didn't know they didn't know anything. I know there was a big push to sweep everything under the rug to look normal around the time of the adoptions. There wasn't a discussion about it, but the fact that I just didn't live there as a teenager and that they didn't raise me at all has never really been acknowledged. But not that nobody should ever know anything. Now my step-siblings want to know the truth of our parents. My parents are blowing up my phone for dredging up the past. I don't think I did anything wrong, but this is also making this a really sticky situation for everyone involved, and that might be. Not the a-hole. They were the neglectful parents here. If they cannot handle even hearing the truth now, that's on them, especially as you were the one who had to live it. Your parents disgust me for the way they neglected you growing up. I have zero sympathy for them whatsoever. You are a much better person than I am to be able to forgive them and give them a second chance like you have. Not the a-hole. It honestly seems like your parents would rather blame you for their problems and pretend they weren't crappy parents to you than really look at themselves and admit their own faults. They are also a-holes for not allowing their other children to be on birth control. If she wants to have S, she's going to do it anyways. It doesn't matter if they approve or not. They should feel lucky she's asking to get on birth control first, rather than blindside them with a teen pregnancy. Not the a-hole. Their failures as parents are not your problem, nor should it be swept under the rug and hidden, as regardless of the circumstances, they are failures. Their inability to accept responsibility for their actions is not your problem, nor are you expected to lie to your half-siblings to protect their image. They failed you, period. And they failed to tell you that they were listening is also their failure. Remind them that they can look up the dictionary definition of self-accountability, and maybe stop failing you for a change. So, a little backstory. Back in the early 2000s, I had just enlisted for the military. I went off to boot camp, and while I was gone, I told my younger brother, don't mess with my vehicles while I'm gone. Well, he didn't listen, so after boot camp, I found out he crashed my car. He had gotten it repaired by the time I came back. However, the starter wasn't working. He said he knows what to do and took me on a ride. Well, turns out, the kid learned how to break into cars. He found a car and proceeded to get into it, pop the hood, and remove the part that was needed. My dumbass, seeing an opportunity, decided to check the trunk and liberated a few items. Long story short, cops caught up to us and I threw my brother under the bus. He took the rap while I continued with my service. He is upset that I threw him under the bus. We make up over the years and decided to buy him a motorcycle that he wanted, and we seem to have a good relationship. He would have relationship issues, work issues, whatever, and he would call and we'd chat, and I would try to help guide him. Last year, his business was struggling, and he called crying. I asked him how much he needed to borrow. He said $20K. I said okay, but with this money, I will be checking in on you every week to make sure you're doing okay. We agreed. I checked in with him every week for a little over a month. Then he would stop picking up my calls and ignore my text. I left him alone, figuring he just needed space. Month goes by, no word. He finally reached out and says everything is better now. I asked him when he is able to return the money, and he said I can forget about it. It's payback for when I ruined his life 20 years ago. Am I the a-hole for pursuing the debt? My mom doesn't want to be involved because I mentioned suing him, but I know that will completely end the relationship, but I kind of don't care. My thoughts are, yeah, there was an incident 20 years ago. We worked past that. He asked for help. I helped him. Just this Thanksgiving we saw each other, and I mentioned about the money that was owed. He got heated. I said I just want my money back. He wrote a check and threatened to shoot me the next time he saw me. Well, the check was stopped a few days later and reversed out of my account. What are everyone's thoughts? Everyone sucks here. Don't act like you're completely innocent in all of this. You are both at fault, and you know it. Also, don't lend money that you can't afford to lose, especially to someone you wronged in the past. Everyone sucks here. Don't lend money you can't lose. Don't throw family under the bus. I don't agree with his actions, but you aren't any prize chicken either. Meh, not the a-hole. If you made it perfectly clear that it was a loan and you have an agreement to back it up, preferably a written one, you're entitled to that money back. However, I caution going straight down the court route. I'm a barrister, and going to court over this will likely permanently damage or destroy your relationship with your brother forever. Further, it may end up costing you more than the $20K to take him to court, particularly if you lose and have an order for costs made against you. Think about this long and hard. Maybe let things cool down for a couple of months. Seek legal advice and be sure to have a strong case. I would also look into alternative dispute resolution, such as arbitration or mediation first. See if an agreement can be reached out of court first.